Welcome back. It's your Open Source Cowboys once again.
Woo!
We're going to go ahead and take a look at a few additional things as we move on our journey, learning more about Cardano, Intersect, and how this all comes together. Christian?
Which kind of reminds me, I think we branched off last time, Open Source Committee, something like that, or we were going to delve more into it.
Well, we're definitely talking about committees. I think we might still have a little bit of Cardano education to provide, but we can definitely touch on both. And I think we'll do a focus on the Open Source Committee where we stand.
Okay. That sounds good to me. With that being said, what are the committees in Intersect? Tex?
The committees at Intersect. Man, that's a good one. That's a good one. So we have 7 steering committees. So as of right now, these are not necessarily subject to change, but as of right now, we have the Open Source Committee. That's OSC, and that's where, of course, where we stem into. We also have the Technical Steering Committee, or TSC, and these are going to be our big project headers, right? Anything that's going on technically with a project, anything that is going to be like a working group for a project, or in the directly in the repos, right, in that code. That's our Technical Steering Committee. We have our Membership and Community Committee, tying in all of our members, the community overall, and that's going to help drive more of the community, the Cardano community, right, to want to be a member of Intersect, right, to want to be involved in what's going on.
I think they pioneered the membership journey. I help with the benefit allocation, what that should look like, community structures, etc.
Very nice. Very nice. A few others to note: we have our Civics Committee, who's currently working on the Cardano Constitution. We also have the Parameters Committee, and help me out here. I think I'm missing 2 of them.
Oh, this is part of your onboarding lesson. What does the Parameters Committee do?
Well, the Parameters Committee is going to set parameters for the Technical Steering Committee, so there's a little bit of inter-committee work that way.
So yes and no. So Parameters Committee does do parameters, but it's related to the Cardano blockchain. Right now, they have a bunch of proposals and ideas for how it should go through, and then the TSC is going to be the final sign-off on that.
Absolutely.
So you're close. You get 5 out of the $10.
I just remembered the last 2 committees. We've got the Roadmap Committee and the Budget Committee.
Really?
How about it?
Are you asking me this time?
No, I'm not asking. I'm telling you. With the Budget and the Roadmap Committee, those last 2.
But what are they? What do they do?
All right. Well, the Budget Committee is going to be in charge of anything that requires budget, right? Although we'd like to think that project management is something that you can just do for free, you can't. Every project has a cost, right?
Yeah, completely. And then the Roadmap Committee?
Yeah, absolutely. So a Roadmap Committee, that's, you could basically consider that almost the top tier, right? They're going to filter through everything that we do. They're going to bring us in those projects, and then our other committees, the OSC, the TSC, the MCC, we're going to give it that good once over and make sure that it is aligned with what the development is on Cardano, and then that moves along the budget just to get approved.
Yeah. Just to clarify that too, so you do have the distinction of the different committees. Civics is kind of intersects collaboration with the community towards things civil, i.e. Constitution or other matters like that, or provide their opinions to different civil situations on Cardano. The membership community, it's in the name, helps with the membership. The TSC, the OSC, the RC, Roadmap Committee, and then the Budget Committee are all intertwined. And that's where you're coming into the Open Source Committee, which I'll let you delve into. But they kind of dictate how we do development. The TSC is the technical architecture and SMEs related to the tech stack. So they tell us all the feasibility, what makes sense, and their expert opinions on what should go through. The roadmap is going to be that product, features, requests, things like that come out of the working groups. They'll help. To my knowledge, mind you, all of this was subject to change, but to my expert wisdom that I do not have, the roadmap committee is going to be the product optimization type thing, replacing what in a standard company would be a product backlog, tribe functions. That is now done in parallel with the TSC, where all of that gets put into a lovely, lovely roadmap of the future of Cardano and the different work and different categories that come out of that. And budget committee assigns the monetary buckets to each of those items. And it's a heavy bureaucratic involved community process. That's the best way to have it because it's streamlined.
Absolutely. Well, I think you touched on probably the biggest key point we have: community, right?
Yeah.
We're a members-based organization at Intersect, so community is going to be our number one.
Absolutely. Which reminds me, didn't I leave a little anecdote that we'd come back to you on the open source committee? So what's that about?
Yeah,
what are those
absolutely.
apples?
Well, I'm sure everyone else is wondering as well. What is the Open Source Committee? What do they actually do? Why a committee, right? Well, as a committee, we've got a number of different seats. I think we're slated for 10. Right now, we've got about 7. One of those seats has Christian involved, as we're doing quite a bit of work here from just the open source office side. A couple of other seats come from not only some of our core suppliers or partners, but also from community members, right, and members of Intersect, therefore, as well, that have a good knowledge on open source in general, right? They've either been experienced in it or they've done quite a bit of study. So they're able to bring in what you might call an expert opinion, right? But also help to just drive supportive workflow.
Completely. They have a stake in everything that has to do with open source dictation. So they're there to help guide and roll the path forward. But a little background information on them too. So I helped put it together right after Intersect was incorporated, or whatever the legal term is on its start, back in August. And so the committee, I was in India at the time, so it was a fun trying to pioneer the time zones. But essentially, all we did was reach out to all the founding members at that point in time, whoever had interest, and that's how we formulated the OSC. Our good friend Pat Sheridan helped chair that for that interim basis until he passed his role off to Nick Clark. It was more technical driven in that regard. But during that, that's how we help formulate the pathway, roadmap, how we're going to get a strategy, the Cardano migration. And then come January, we did results thing, and then we start holding transparent meetings, public community plugins, bringing in more community members onto the seats, doing a rotation. And eventually, that's where I think the timeline where you came into the scene, right when we had just finished the strategy.
Right about. Yeah, it seemed like there was definitely some interim changes as far as those seats were concerned, but definitely the introduction of that strategy. That's definitely something we're going to get to here in just a moment. What I'll start with here, as far as diving more into the open source committee, right? What we start to do is enable the decentralization of the development of Cardano, right? Want to make sure that this is a project, the project of Cardano as a whole, right? Looking to make sure that the thriving community that is excited about Cardano, I can tell you the community is thriving. We went to Consensus just a month ago, and the booth was just loaded. Oh, I'm familiar with Cardano, or hey, I hold ADA. What's going on? Tell me some more. So that's something else that we can kind of review in a later session. But yeah, we want to get that thriving community, and we want to make sure that they not only feel that their voices are heard, but that they're able to see directly the decisions that they make and how that changes the development structure for Cardano moving forward.
Completely. We do have a big community, and that was the whole reason the committee was founded to begin with, because now we have the Cardano core source code, but it's no longer under the core company who is helping coordinate its development work with the other entities and community interest. But now that we're Intersect's here, it's community owned, basically through the membership, and now Intersect owns the source code, so now Cardano is community owned by a derivative of that equation. But how do you actually, other than its code on GitHub, how do you actually tackle making Cardano open source?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, I mean, one of the biggest things with making it open source is transparency, right? What's changing in the development, people have to be aware of, especially if they're going to make a decision on it. So that's something where we lead with the open source committee and ensuring that realistically any conversation that we have, any decision that's made, not only has it been discussed and it's available in a public format, whether by text or by watching our meeting recordings, but that can be understood, right? If you went back to our first or second video there, we went through our why open source, right? Why are we doing what we're doing, and what was so important with the OSC and how they helped us at the open source office to tell us what the community's thinking, what they're feeling.
Yeah.
Transparency.
So, and that's where shout out to Sandeep, my man. He was one of the few unlucky fellows who got to help me do a bunch of coordination with community stakeholders, people who are wanting to do input, while I manage the Google survey side of it. But we compiled a gigantic document on criticisms of Cardano and the equation of open source. Where are we building from? We came out with 7 general topics. There is a link, I think, somewhere on our Gitbook related to that. It's definitely in the publication deck that we shared in that Why Open Source. But it covers 7 areas, which is like centralization concerns, slow development pace, lack of community engagement, lack of technical documentation, things like that. And it just makes it hard for someone who's new to the scene to come into it. So, what that came about, that gave the committee the community input as to how we should target and how we should approach this problem. And so that's where we had the lovely conversation of a strategy.
Strategy?
Yeah.
Who needs those?
That's a question, right? Strategies are good, but what are they if not executed?
Well, if not effective as well.
True. Or relevant. There's a lot of strategies for strategies, but that's a rabbit hole for another day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we can dive more into it, right? Our strategy focuses on 3 key pillars.
Well, even more than that, because this also challenged the committee to try and find its purpose within Intersect, right?
Most definitely. Most definitely. Well, even if it's not just 3 key pillars, there's 3 things that we set a focus out for when it comes to the strategy, or at least the initial strategy, right? Strategies can change over time. Get to a point where you've achieved all the goals that you set forth in that strategy. Now you got to have a strategy to build, adapt, and develop that further. So what are those 3 things? Right, we keep talking about 3 magical things. Well, technical sustainability, governance and decision making, community engagement, and collaboration. So breaking this down here, as far as technical sustainability, what we want to take a look at is making sure that when it comes down to whoever is going to be writing this code, right, our community members, whether they're a member of Intersect or just a member of the community in general, and decentralized, so it can be anybody. Open source is in that same terminology. We want this to be open and accessible to anybody and everybody to improve it how they see fit. So we've got to make sure that those resources are fully established, easily referenced, have easy references, right? Easy references to find is what we're getting at. But also making that process not seem so difficult to get into. If you want to go and make a change on the code, hey, pick the repository, right? But what are the rules and guidelines that you should follow? There's an understanding of the code, there's an understanding of what the project is altogether. If you've never read a README before, well, maybe that's where you start, right? But sustainability is making sure that all of those references stay up to date. And as the project changes or as the goal changes, making sure that those references are updated accordingly, so it's straightforward.
Well, and then even tackling that too, the biggest concern of the whole migration to begin with is now it's outside of the teams who are keeping it organized, functional, running, and now they're just a supplier helping contribute back to that source code. So now that the governance structure is completely changed, where it's now a decentralized environment, how do you actually make that work? And I think the committee actually had a solution to that, did it not?
I believe so, but we should get to that.
Okay.
We'll get there.
I'm jumping ahead of the gun. But yeah, technical sustainability just means making sure that when that transition came over, everything's still stable, sustainable, and scalable. But now we're getting, since I keep peppering that word governance that everyone loves and everyone has a different definition to, governance and decision making. And that was a heavy topic and probably the first thing that we came into. Let's hear your understanding of it. Pop quiz.
Pop quiz. Well, we talked about transparency, right? And where's transparency if you don't know what decisions are being made or how to make those decisions? Best part about Intersect and being a member-based organization is not only for the future of Intersect, but the future development on Cardano, we're looking to fully facilitate the membership, the community, right, can have the ability to make those decisions. The governance is going to be that standby, right? It says, says, here's the rules in which we can make decisions on how Cardano becomes developed now and in the future. So it's structured across various different voting mechanisms. It's structured based on the project changes, and that's probably a pretty weak definition. Maybe
I'll
you can
give
help
you
me
a
out.
C. I knew there. But the governance structure, basically, with the key concern, is actually allowing contributors to have a touch base beholding those transparent open meetings within what we're calling project management committees. We might need to change the term, or PMC.
Sure.
But essentially, that just anything that's categorized with a component of Core Cardano, those maintainers meet. This is where the working groups come in, like Plutus is probably a good example to pull from, or my man Marchin, who pioneered the network piece of it, or Boris. But essentially, they're holding those public meetings where the first half is to go over that future feature improvement, SIP output side of it. And the latter half goes into that day-to-day management. You submit an issue on Plutus or Ouroboros network, and you haven't had that resolved, or you have questions related to it, and rather than do comments on GitHub, you can get a direct answer because this forum is now available and there to you. And if it's a issue, or why your PR is not merged, but let's get to a security issue, that actually establishes an escalation path where you can have that conversation or schedule a time with the maintainer privately to discuss it. And then if that can't be resolved there, now you have the Meta Project Committee, which is up and coming for Core Cardano. And that'll be a meeting that ties in all the components of at least what's under the Intersect Core Cardano mandate, and get decisions made there. And then you have the path to the TSC for something that's architectural and can't be resolved at any of the lower levels due to the complexity.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and this isn't to jump into it right this second, but I thought I heard a buzzword there, maintainer.
Maintainer is a buzzword. It has no meaning.
Well, I'm sure that's not the definition of a
No,
buzzword.
I can't maintain that conversation. But no, the fun thing about maintainers, which is actually a key thing we can get to, also related to objectives that we're getting to with maintainership, is currently, if you look at any of the repos, it's usually the same dev teams. We are working to bring in that community attribute piece to it. And shout out to my man, Adam Dean. All right. Yeah, everyone's going to be my man by the end of this. But he's helping us pilot with Cardano addresses, coordinating a community maintainer plugin, and testing how we do that, building the contribution process, which is going to be a part of the remit of the policy working group. So if you're interested in that, just reach out to Adam. But once this pilot concludes this week and we release the results of it by the end of Q2, we'll be expanding that to the other projects, which leads into one of our goals, which is diversifying the Core Cardano maintainership. And at least having two maintainers not from the same place making decisions and collaborating.
And I'll tell you, sometimes you're just like a roadrunner. Jumping right ahead to the objectives. We can't even finish with 3 key points, but that's okay. No,
well, I did go to UTSA
too. Hey, birds up.
Roadrunners.
Last point, no, it was a great segue there, right? So you talked about the pilot program from the maintainer perspective, and what are we looking to do there? Engage the community, right?
Yep.
All right, well, that last point. So I'm sure maybe some of you had a question. You're like, okay, you got a third main key focus here, or a third pillar, or 3 of the main that we want to look at right now, community engagement and collaboration. So what does open source have to do with that? Honestly, that's a great question.
It's a redundant question.
What's that?
It's a redundant question.
Is it? I don't know. But anyway, so everything that we keep talking about, right? You say community engagement, and you can say that you want your community to be involved 100 times over, and nothing happens until you actually make that possible. That's where all of these start to come together. Transparency, open sharing, letting the community members get involved, not only from this maintainer aspect, but even from all the way down to writing some of that base code, or even just testing it for themselves, right? That way they get a better understanding, and maybe they become just a stronger developer in the future to either work on their own or work with others, build that bigger project. But the way we foster that here is that we encourage that anybody can come and talk to us here as far as our open source office hours. Those are typically held bi-weekly.
I think next Thursday is the next available one.
Sounds about right. And then our open source committee, that meeting is open as well, right? So there's not much that's going to be hidden when you come to open source office here. Realistically, nothing, but obviously there are some. So,
and if you have any concerns, we're a touch base for anything Intersect as well. We can get you with the right people to talk to, and there'll be more engagement in the future from them as well. But I do want to highlight the sacrifice that is not known by the open source committee, which is they actually met on a weekly cadence since August last year to get all this stuff up and running. So a lot of people gave up. We only did a couple months as Wednesday, and then they gave up their Friday evenings Europe side. And shout out to my man Alex, who it was midnight every time he joined and was assisting, and he wasn't even on the committee. He was helping us out from a community perspective. And yeah, we have a few others like that.
Well, just another way to demonstrate, right? You don't have to have a seat on the committee to be doing some work.
Yeah.
Participating.
Honestly, even though the committees, they vote, everyone's voting on the same thing. And we do have an open forum every committee session to objections from anybody. And obviously the committee will work through the logistics of any counterpoints and things like that.
Sure. Well, I think we'll round out our strategy, at least for now. There's more to it. You can definitely read it on our open source Git book. But to open source committee is the Git book page there. But we'll round this out with just the remaining goals. The first.
Well, talking about rounding out the strategy, I think I am going to bore anyone if I continue directly on this topic because I just rant.
I don't know that I would call it a rant, but I think we got through the pillars quite successfully, and we led a little bit on to the goals, but I think we'll pick that up in another session. We'll break this out for y'all.
Yeah, I'm too passionate to. I'm very passionate, so I talk too much. How about that?
Well, I'll tell you, this is where you get wrangled in. You got half a strategy. Better come back for the rest.
Wrangled because you're a cowboy.
Hey. Well, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, everybody, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, see y'all. One good yeehaw, and then we move on. 1, 2, 3.
Yeehaw!